Good. I'm at the National Convention, the National Fundraising Convention of the Institute of Fundraising 2019 here in London. It's an exciting environment to be in. There's a buzz in the background of all these people meeting and greeting and talking and discussing. I'm here with David Burgess. He will introduce himself, but I'm very excited about our conversation. David, tell us something about yourself. So how did you get here?
Hello. Well, I'm director of a fundraising consultancy company, so I work with a lot of arts and culture organisations across the UK, helping them to write strategies, delivering training on individual giving, developing strategies, trust and foundations, a real mix of things. And I love coming to convention. This is the second year in a row where I've been able to come for all 3 days. And as you say, there is such a buzz of passionate, clever, witty, knowledgeable people all in the same space, talking about what they know and learning new things, that it's always a nice chance to spend time with people and reflect and hopefully pick up lots of new information and new ideas.
And you did 2 sessions as a speaker?
Yes, so I've done 2 sessions this morning. The first one on trusts and foundations. So we set up a charitable trust just for today, and we invited organisations to apply for small grants up to £500, and we ended up receiving 35 applications. We whittled it down to the 5 that we could consider in the room, and we had 100 people that came together to play the role of trustees. So they had to read through the proposals and in quite a short space of time decide which ones they were going to fund and which ones they weren't.
Wow, so the delegates, the people in the room, were all of a sudden the decision makers.
Exactly, so that they got to see what it's like when you're presented with a funding proposal for an organisation you don't know, and you have to make those difficult decisions, because all 5 of them were great organisations meeting really important needs and trying to do really exciting projects.
Wow.
And it's really fascinating when you see it on the other side of the fence, just how little time you actually get to read a proposal and to understand it, and you start seeing things that you can learn from in terms of your own writing. You think,
like an example, give me an example of.
Well, I think people often forget the power of telling stories in funding applications. And if I'm being really honest, a lot of funding proposals are really boring to read.
Yes.
They're very dry, they feel very academic, and they don't bring across the passion that the fundraisers, I think, have for their work. I think if you spoke to those same fundraisers in the room and got them to talk about what they do, you would be blown away by how passionate they are.
Yes.
And that doesn't come across on paper.
No. Often we think we need to be serious and professional. And yes, I remember asking one of a vermogensfonds, it's called in Dutch, but a foundation, if I could send a picture with it, and the officer on the other end said, yes, please send a picture. A story and a picture always helps. I didn't realize that there's real humans at the other end who read my funding application, but that really happens, doesn't it?
That's it, and that's absolutely the point. We forget there are human beings with their own interests, their own passions, the things they care about.
Yeah.
And sometimes we talk to them as if foundations are a computer or a sort of faceless body making very cold decisions. And what we found this morning through the session is if you can win one person over in that meeting, you can get them to advocate for you, and you can get them to inspire everyone else and say, absolutely, we should fund this.
Wow, that's really, really good. And then you had another session about football?
Yeah. Yes, completely different.
What was that?
So the morning session I was working with 2 fantastic fundraisers, Marina Jones, who's at the Royal Opera House, Laura Solomon, who's at the Sutton Trust, and then got to work with 2 very good friends, fellow Arsenal fans, Richard Sved and Lizzie Hollis, and we were looking at what we could learn from football, what lessons footballers can learn.
So what is it? Give us some tips.
Well, we looked at the role of the manager, and obviously a football manager has to work with a very skilled group of people, but actually can't do very much when they're out on the pitch. And we looked at the contrasting styles of some managers. So we looked at Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp, Arsene Wenger, who all very successful in their field, but very different management styles. And thinking about what does that mean? Jose Mourinho, quite directive, the special one. Yes. It's my way or you're out. And not necessarily very supportive of his team members. He'll quite often criticise people in public if they do something wrong. And we linked it to situational leadership theory, which looks at different levels of direction that you need to give as a manager, but also the different levels of support you need to give, and understanding that different people and different types of project need a different mix of that direction and that support.
That's a wonderful topic for any kind of next management meeting. Let's talk about management styles in terms of football, and let's look at the different managers and what can I learn from his or her style. We
had a lot of fun putting it together, and we got to show some examples of goals, mainly Arsenal goals, but thinking about what fundraisers can learn. So we had a lesson about being prepared, and I'm not sure if your listeners will remember this, but certainly fans of English football will remember Liverpool about to win the league, and Steven Gerrard famously fell over, gave the ball away, and Chelsea went up and scored. And in the end, Liverpool didn't win. They ended up losing the title race.
Yeah.
But what was important was that the Chelsea player, Demba Ba, was prepared. He saw an opportunity. He saw that might be something there. And we thought about what that means for fundraisers. Those opportunities that come up outside of your strategy. There's things like Ice Bucket Challenge, No Makeup Selfie, that have been global fundraising phenomena completely out of the blue, and it was the charities that were able to react quickly, who saw those opportunities as they were starting to emerge, that were able to benefit from those.
Wow. And then there's another subject you're really passionate about, isn't it? The recruitment. Tell me what you think of recruitment.
So I've just before coming in to record this, we've been to the launch of the Institute of Fundraising's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion strategy.
Yes. Recognising
the fact that certainly here in the UK, the fundraising profession doesn't reflect the rest of society. It doesn't reflect the beneficiaries that a lot of charities are working with, and in a lot of cases, fundraising doesn't reflect the broader mix within charities.
So tell me, how does it look like then? Male people at the top?
Well, so what's interesting and actually a very sad statistic, I think, here in the UK is actually the profession itself is largely female dominated. So there are more female fundraisers than male fundraisers. But as you say, there are more males at the top. Despite the fact having more females fundraising, they're not represented there in those top roles. And the IOF, the Institute, we need to work out what is going on there and what we can do to make sure that imbalance is no longer there. As you say, quite often a middle class background, generally white, people with disabilities underrepresented.
Gay and lesbian people not always coming out on the work.
Well, and not feeling they can be themselves in the workplace. And again, I think in 2019, Peter Lewis, who's the chief executive of the IOF, said that's really disgraceful that at this time that is still a challenge and we need to be better at this. One of the things I've been looking at quite recently is the barriers we put into job descriptions that could be keeping people out, and in particular often the requirement for an unspecified degree as a requirement
level.
So needing a university degree. Universities, again, certainly here in the UK, have a lot of the same equality, diversity and inclusion challenges that we're facing in the sector.
Yes, unfortunately.
There are, again, more white people going, fewer disabled people going,
middle class people going.
Certainly fewer people from low income families going to university. And I started looking at why this requirement was there and thinking, what is that adding? And thinking, it's not adding anything. Going to university doesn't of itself make you a better fundraiser.
No.
Yes, it might be one way you can gain some of the skills that are important, but it's certainly not the only way.
No.
And by insisting that everyone that we recruit, or a large numbers of people that we recruit, have university degrees, we're cutting off a huge number of people who would have the skills, have the ability, who would make incredibly successful fundraisers. We're shutting the door to them at those early stages, but also right through to the top level.
Absolutely.
I've seen director of development, director of fundraising roles recently that say you must have 10 years of experience as a successful fundraiser, and you also must have a degree.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
If I've shown I can do it for 10 years, what does my educational background
Exactly, and
mean?
I remember a very wise owl once told me that you hire, I was head of fundraising, you hire for attitude. The rest is not really important. The right attitude and all the rest you can learn. You agree?
I think it's something I've been reflecting on a lot recently. As an arts and culture fundraiser, I've always seen passion and enthusiasm for the art form as being quite important, because you're often talking to donors who are incredibly knowledgeable about the subject area.
Yes.
Perhaps to a greater level than in other parts of the sector.
Yes.
They've spent their life engaging with the arts. They can tell you almost with encyclopedic knowledge the artists they've seen, and they have very strong opinions about
opera, all that's very detailed.
Exactly. I'd have people coming up to me saying, "Oh, did you see this performance in Berlin 20 years before I was actually born?" And you thought, no, sorry, I missed that one. But they still remember, and they use that to because it is what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I've always found it's quite difficult if you don't share that passion, or for some supporters it's quite hard to build that rapport and build that connection.
Yeah.
But more and more I'm thinking actually people learn new passions all the time, so is that so important, as important? I think there are definitely some key skills that fundraisers have, and communication is obviously a key one, whichever type of fundraising you're working in. The ability to get your story across, I think, is very important. The ability to empathise both with the beneficiaries that you're ultimately raising money to support, but also the donors, the supporters that you're there to serve and to help as well is a really key skill to have.
And in Holland we face the same problem, where there are good fundraisers absolutely doing a wonderful job, but then raising them up into management positions and becoming senior management roles is not that easy. So and you don't necessarily need a university degree for it at all. No,
although I think it's interesting to see what support we provide for managers, because managing a team is a very different skill.
Absolutely.
And often we promote people because they're good at fundraising, and you work your way up. And often we forget the investment that's needed to support people, both to keep fundraising, but also to make sure they're getting the best out of their teams.
Yeah.
I certainly remember from earlier in my career, the first time I had to take on a management role, really struggling and just thinking, I just want to go back to the fundraising bits. I could do that.
Yeah.
And not feeling I had the support there to understand how to get the best out of staff.
Yeah. So where did you start in fundraising, David?
I started for a wonderful orchestra up in Manchester called Manchester Camerata, and I started with the organisation actually in their education and community team. So I was working with them 2 days a week to plan projects, taking musicians out into communities, into schools, and often giving young people the first chance to hear how wonderful and how magical it is when you hear classical music played live, even if it's just one musician there with a violin. And I really enjoyed that chance to kind of experience that magical moment. And an opportunity came up in their fundraising team while I was there, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. It wasn't something I'd really thought about at the time. And they'd asked me if I would fundraise for the projects I was delivering. So I'd spend 3 days of the week on fundraising and 2 days going out.
That's a perfect combination, isn't it?
It was nice because it meant I could tell that story. I'd been in the room, I'd seen 30 pairs of 10-year-old children's eyes light up on hearing those first notes.
Yes.
You sort of feel that electricity in the room as all of a sudden they're sat there open-mouthed thinking, this is fantastic.
And then it's easier to convince a donor, isn't it?
You can get that message across.
Convey that whole atmosphere. Yes, we talk a lot about passion and how to keep on being passionate about what you do. If you're just a fundraiser, if you're only fundraising, in your first job you had both. That's wonderful. I think
it's definitely helped, and it's meant every time I've started a new role, I try and get out onto the front line as much as possible and spend time with the people that are delivering the work, seeing what it actually means to the people experiencing the charity's work.
So, one last question, David. So, you've been at the conference for 3 days now. Wow. Is there anything you would say to Dutch listeners? Whoa, this is a very good reason why you should come to the conference. Why should they come to the conference? What do you think?
I think there's such diversity in terms of the program, and it doesn't matter what level you are at in terms of your career, if you're just starting or if you've been doing this for a long time. You will find sessions that help you see fundraising in a new light, that spark ideas, that for me, I always see it as a chance to sort of reignite that passion. It's by coincidence that Convention always falls on the anniversary of me setting up my consultancy company, so it's a chance to reflect and come away with just a new fire to go out and work with clients and support
especially
clients.
With your background, people who come to the fundraising, we only have a day, so we don't have 3 days, but we have a fundraising day. People who come there come from the arts and culture, with an arts and cultural background too. So will they find enough here too?
Absolutely. So the IOF has a special interest group or a committee that looks solely at arts and culture, and the Institute has a commitment to engage more with the arts and culture sector as part of their business plan, as part of their strategy. So on each of the days there have been people from arts and culture organisations talking about their work, often alongside charities from the wider sector. It's a really nice way of saying, what can arts and culture fundraisers learn from other charities? What can other charities learn from arts and culture fundraisers?
Absolutely, yes.
And that diverse mix of causes and of people in the room is what makes Convention great. The other thing for people certainly travelling from abroad, there are probably people here who you know from Twitter, who you've heard talking about at other conventions. And for me it's been really nice meeting them in the flesh, people I feel I know really well because I follow them and I've talked to them on Twitter for years. Finally being able to get in the room with them and talk together is really exciting.
Yes, more and more that personal one-to-one is good too. Yes, in an almost virtual world. Thank you so much, David, for spending time with us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We were on location during the Fundraising Convention 2019 in London by the Institute of Fundraising. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts or fondsenwerving.nl/podcasts.